So we are Tangled Times, Independence First United Methodist Church. I am Lydia Istomina and Ted Whitmire. We are co-hosting this podcast. Ted, please greet our viewers.
Hello, thanks for joining us this evening, and hope you're excited to learn a little bit about history as we unravel a little bit of our own church history. So,
Yeah.
thanks for being with us.
And yes, thank you for being with us. And our Tangle Times is a step toward our 190th anniversary. There are so many things happening in Independence, and John and Sheryl Morrison were our guests 2 months ago. We skipped 1 month for obvious reasons. It was a Lent season, so we were all kind of taking a time to recuperate and pray. But we did not stop working because Sheryl and John came up with an idea to create a group on a Facebook page of the church, and this is a journey toward 190th anniversary. So ever since we have discussions, we have questions, we have quizzes, and people are getting more active. So thank you, first of all, John and Sheryl, for this idea, because it seems like it's generating quite energy and memories, and more names are coming on the Facebook. So please introduce yourself to our audience. John, maybe you
I'll
or
go
Sheryl?
first. Yeah, my name's John Morrison, and member of the church for a long time, and been through most parts of the church, and enjoy sharing stories about different areas that a lot of people are not familiar with, and try to answer weird things in the church.
I'm Sheryl Morrison. I'm married to John in our church almost 44 years ago. And I'm just along for the ride.
Yes, it's quite a journey. So let's begin. What are we going to talk today? What we did not finish the first time.
Well, we kind of left off when the first educational wing was added to the church, which is where the dining room and the kitchen are on the first floor. And you can't have a Methodist church without a kitchen. They have to be able to feed people, and not only our members, but the community. And then the second floor was mainly classrooms, and the third floor also was mainly classrooms. One of the questions that I got from someone was, why is there a ramp downstairs? When you're on the level and the below the sanctuary, and you go past the restrooms there, it's a ramp. And the only reason was architectural problems. When they did the blueprints and the plans to put in the dining room and the kitchen, the level was wrong. They put in the floor and realized that there was about an 8 or 9 inch step that would have been there, and rather than just have the step, they took out that section and made a gradual ramp out of it so that there wouldn't be a step. That before that addition was added, you would walk straight in the basement and come to a doorway where the doorway is now going from the ramp to the dining room. That was an exterior door, and you would step out the door and step down the steps there, walk about 10 feet and go to the parsonage at that time. So when they tore down the parsonage and built that addition, they decided that they would just have a ramp there rather than a step. So I have to answer that question. Another question about that particular area, the dining room area, was for whoever works in the kitchen is probably aware that when you go out the north exit of the kitchen, like you're going to go down to the basement, down to the furnace room, there's a set of stairs. If you turn right there, there's a set of stairs that goes up about 8 or 10 stairs, but they only go up to some shelves. And somebody was asking me why they would have steps going up to just a bunch of shelves. Well, at the time when they added that section, the dining room section, that was an exterior exit from the church.
Oh, wow.
You would go up those steps, and there was a door there to take you outside, and it was just an exit. But when the education wing was added, they couldn't use that as an exit anymore, so they just bricked it off and closed it off and thought they would just use that platform up there for storage shelves.
Interesting. Now I definitely will go to the basement to check it out. I did see that, but I'd never connected.
Yeah, it was functional at a time. It went up to the steps to go out of the church. When we had the Wesley Center, that was one of the main exits. People would go out that door, run across the alley to the Wesley Center, and then come back in the same way. It was the closest exit. So those were two things. There are a couple of others which we'll kind of get to when we get to that area. But did you guys have any other questions or anything about that section, or the ramp or the stairs? Or
Can you remind me what the Wesley Center is?
Oh, I'll get to that.
Okay.
It's before. Let me get kind of in order. When the church decided that they needed more educational, more rooms for classrooms, the next door neighbor to the north was a funeral home. And they decided to sell the funeral home to the church. And when we bought it, we decided to use it as additional classroom space.
It was
So
the
first floor was
Kepley.
that.
The Kepley Funeral Home.
It was a Kepley Funeral Home, yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, we have members in the church that used to own a funeral home, but not that one. Lost their name. Anyway, yeah, it was a Kepley Funeral Home, and the first floor was a married class. It was the Emeritus class. And the second floor was for the mid-school range kids, 7th, 8th, 9th grade. And then the upstairs, the top floor, was for the senior high MYF group, which was the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And that's where classes were held from 1957 until 1975. So classes were held there for a long time. I went to Sunday school there. Sheryl went to Sunday school there. It was used for many things, but it was mainly just an overflow for the church to be able to have other services there and other classrooms there.
It was apparently used for the NYF group to play hide and seek in, which I don't remember doing that, but apparently we did.
I know I played hide and seek in all the churches I grew up in. So.
Yeah, but that was a funeral home, Tad. I don't know what we were thinking.
That's kind of a little spooky to me.
Well, one of the problems was that the youth, the MYF group, wanted to have a money-making project, and they decided to save newspapers. At the time, I was a Kansas City Star carrier, and I had access to all of the overflow papers that were collected from Eastern Jackson County. And so as a youth group, we would go around and pick up papers, and the only place we could store them was in the basement of the Wesley Center. And many of the girls were not crazy, especially about going down into the basement of a funeral home. So they were able to handle it in daylight, but I don't think there was ever anybody down there at nighttime. But that's where we kept all of our newspapers until we could take them and recycle them.
Adds to the mystique. So we like that.
Yes.
Now you said until the 70s. Is that when it was removed, or?
Yes, in 1975, we requested from the city that they vacate the alley because the alley ran right along where the educational wing of the church was at that time, the dining room and kitchen. There was, when you went out that door, up those steps and out that door, there was a sidewalk that ran down towards Spring, and it was used, it was a public sidewalk, but the alley was right there that we had to cross to get to the funeral home. And so the city had to agree to allow us to vacate the alley, so they no longer had use or ownership over it, and they granted it then to the church. And since the church would be able to build the new educational wing, which is the one where the elevator is. And
But
they
so
built
did you?
that- Pardon?
Did you have to demolish that funeral home?
Yes,
Okay.
it was torn down, and with the alley vacated, we could attach a perpendicular addition that ran north and south onto the existing structure. And by tearing down, in order to have that space, in order to get out there, the Wesley Center had to be torn down.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it were in place today, it would be basically in that green grass area that exists outside the church between Spring and the church there.
When
So
you
it had to be removed.
Yeah,
And-
when you turned it out, did you find any surprises, any bones?
As far as I know,
I don't think so.
they didn't find anything that wasn't able to be explained.
Very fascinating. Okay, Ted, lead us on.
Yeah. So I heard you had some like images for us, and that you wanted to share some of the
You want to like
transformations.
diagrams of how things were positioned?
Yeah.
Well, I can. It's kind of a summary that we can either look at now or towards the end. I've gone through and done some pictures of everything from what it was like when it was just grass and what it looks like today. And if you'd like to see those, we can go through each one and explain that. I did have a question about the remodeling of the sanctuary, but we can whichever way you want to go.
Why don't you start with the very beginning one?
What's that? Do the
Yeah, start with the very
s-
beginning diagram, and we can see the
screen
progression.
number 7.
Oh, okay.
Number 7, Ted.
All right, let's
Very-
pull this up. So we got some images here. This is the old church, right?
That's the old brick church. Yeah.
The first church, but let's see what it looked like. Oh,
Okay.
This is 9. Nope, not quite. This is the first
Whoops.
one. All right.
Okay, that's the very first one, and that was in 1827. The City of Independence was first incorporated in 1827, and that's when they went through and marked off and blocked off different parts of the city so that they could be sold to individuals. And the church bought the two lots number 34 and 35, which is in the lower right-hand corner there. At that time, it was Rock Street. Now it's Maple. And on the north of this section was just an alley. And it was an alley that existed between Old Town and New Town. Old Town was everything south of that alley, and New Town was everything north of that alley. And then two existing streets, Spring and Pleasant, on each side, east and west of us. And this is this is what it looked like before any construction was done anywhere in the section. Basically covered by trees and grass.
So the church is in the old town part,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes,
I did not know that.
everything, like I said, everything south of what is today Truman Road is considered Old Town.
Okay. We go to the next one, Ted?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't heard about Old Town, New Town. So as we're expanding past Truman, we get into the new establishment. I mean, at this time in 1827, it was already empty. So was it really Old Town at that point? It was still growing, but
The town existed without borders, without name, and without any. There were just a lot of people because it was a jump off place for the three trails, the trails to head west, and so it was mainly a storage facility. At that time, they would fill people's wagons up so they could head west, and as they managed to get together, in 1827, the people in Independence who were wanting to form a church were just meeting in homes and businesses, and in about 1835 was when they were first recognized by the Missouri State Methodist Church, and they were given a charter to be a Methodist church and were assigned with their first minister. But they were still just meeting in homes, and they decided that they needed to build a small building, and that's what shows on this second picture. This is about 1840 when the church was actually built. The very first church was completed in 1840.
This is that red brick building, right?
Yeah, that's the red brick building, that one, and it is the one it's got the two entrances. One on the right was for the white members, and the one on the left was for the black members of the church.
Wait. So this is interesting. May I ask you a question? It was a question that we posted on the Facebook, and some people answered that it was for the black people and for the white people. Others answered it was women and men. So what is the correct answer?
Well, I wasn't there, so I'm not absolutely certain. But I do know that this building had, in the left door, you would go up a set of steps to a balcony, and the balcony was in the rear of the church. And the assumption that I make from that is that, and by what we've read from the books that we have, that balcony was reserved for the black members.
Okay, so
it would
then,
make sense. It would
well,
make sense
yeah.
that the left, yeah.
Interesting, because we had winners, and so one lady says, actually Paula, that she said that it was for the black people and white people, and then other people says for women and men. So I think she deserves a reward too. Then it was a $10 certificate to Panera Bread, so we have to correct it.
Well, the once they got in, and again, you see a chimney sticking out of the roof there. That was on the right-hand side of the church, is where the men sat. So, but when they went inside, they on the same level, the women sat on the left side, and there was another chimney over there on that side of the church, so that it was heated equally, but it was left and right for men and women downstairs. But the only ones that used the balcony were the black members.
So I think that was an ambiguous question, and anybody could have been right, Lydia.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will just give gift certificates to everybody. But I think it's true, because it's otherwise it's hard to find out what was the true usage for those doors. So we will just kind of reward everybody.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And they, according to what I read, they were very nice, solid mahogany doors. So there wasn't a differentiation. There were two windows in the men's side and two windows in the women's side. And there was another small door in the back of the church, or on the north side, that was used just mainly for the preacher to come in and go out. But it was also another exit.
Something you said just makes me think, just culturally, it's weird. Why were the women and men sitting on opposite sides? Did they not sit with their family and their husbands and wives, or what?
It's just that period of time. Um,
Yeah.
they didn't believe that there should be any intermingling of men and women in a church.
Mm-hmm.
The church was reserved for church services, and it was not at that time considered proper for men and women to sit together.
Yeah, that's what I've read too. Thank you, John. And I think many people did not know about it, so thank you so much for explaining. And if you could add more to that, that will help.
Another little sidelight, which really has nothing to do with this, but my family came from Virginia, and they had a small church like this, and the Morrison family had a pew that was the right next to the furnace. And the only ones that got to have the pew that was right next to the furnace were the ones who were the biggest supporters of the church. So I don't know if that existed in this church. I haven't been able to find that out, but it would make sense that the more influential people would get the preferred location, sitting
See,
close to
having
the furnace.
the pew that you sit in every Sunday, the same pew, has been a long tradition in the Methodist Church.
It is very
in-
true. Yeah, it
in
is
fact,
my
that-
pew.
That's
In
right.
fact, that church still exists in Virginia, and they have a plaque on the end of our pew that was the Morrison family pew.
What city is it in?
It's it's just south of oh gosh,
Richmond.
yeah, just south of Richmond, but it's not really in a major city. It's New Monmouth is the name of the church. You can look it
Oh.
up. It's New Monmouth Presbyterian Church.
No.
And they had an old church there. The original one was just the Monmouth Church, and it burned down. And so they built another one on the same location, and it was called the New Monmouth Church. And that's where my family came from. I've got a list back in the 1700s. There were a lot of Morrison family members there.
Yeah, it's quite a famous name. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's continue now. What is a quick question before we continue? When you say old town and new town, was it just geographic difference, or it was also cultural? For example, in some places, when the city starts growing, it becomes like a poor and rich, or it becomes maybe black and white or mixed community. So what was there?
The designation between Old and New Town was mainly based on the divisions and the sections and the numbering of them. Everything south from Truman Road down to about 5 blocks, I can't remember exactly which street it was all considered Old Town. And from Pleasant, which was the end, all the way back on the other side of Maine, about 3 blocks. And those are the first ones that when the planners sat down and divided the city into these sections, that all they did originally was the Old Town. And then because that's the only section where they were subdividing. And when people then decided to start expanding and moving north of the alley into what they then called Newtown, they called it Newtown because it was a newer development area.
New houses, okay.
So-
New houses
only
and new
geographic.
buildings.
And only geographic, okay. Location, okay. Interesting.
Okay.
So at this point in time, they're in Old Town. There's still very few buildings. I mean, I don't know what the population was back in the 1830s, 1840s, but pretty sparse still. But it was building up because of the Oregon Trail and stuff, people coming through.
Yeah,
at that time.
like I said, the city received its formal documentation of being a city in 1827, and so that's why I put that date on that particular one, because in 1827 is when they first started dividing the sections and numbering them for purchase. The section that they bought there cost $150. Okay.
Unbelievable. So cheap. Yeah. It's hard to convert it into the present value. Okay. Yeah. So, but that's the first initial building was in section 34.
Correct.
And
That's
now
on the
it
next-
takes how many?
On the next slide, Ted.
Well,
Oh yeah, sure.
they bought section 34 and 35, and
There.
they put that red brick church, which is on that screen, in that location on the site on the place. And then that was the only building they had. Also, they built a fence around the church. I don't know why, but they did. So the church had a fence all the way around it, and it may have been something having to do with the Civil War coming up, approaching. That this was built in 1840, and it was a South church. It was the Methodist Church South, so that may have had something to do with it. But anyway, they built a fence around the church, that original church.
So when they originally built it, it was called Methodist Church South in 1840.
No, it was just called Methodist Church at first. It was decided to call it. It was in 1848, I believe, that they met and decided. The Methodist Church decided that at least in Missouri they would have North and South churches, and that's when it was given the additional name of the Methodist Church South. And that was before it was be called Methodist Episcopal or United Methodist. Those all came later also.
And that's what I asked you about the North and South church town, because it could point at that segregation, but it wasn't. Only later the church became the Church of the South, Methodist Church South.
That's correct. Once the Methodist Church in the state of Missouri decided that they needed a designation between churches to either be North and South, that's when it was assigned to the South. The membership in the church decided which they wanted. So this church decided they wanted to be South affiliated, so it became the South. The Watson Memorial Church, 10 blocks west of us, decided they wanted to be North.
Okay.
I'll share that I just did some calculation, and that $150 we got for that plot of land is $6,700 nowadays. Still a pretty good deal, I'd say.
It's still a pretty good deal.
True.
Okay, and the next slide is when the membership in the Little Brick Church decided that they needed to fix it up. The balcony in particular was in really bad shape. The roof was in really bad shape, and they really felt like they needed to either repair it or replace it. There was a lot of discussion. Their original decision was to repair it. They started getting together to decide what needed to be done, and decided that it's not worth it. It just needs to be torn down and a whole nother building built. And so in 1859, they completed the structure that you see there, and it was 40 feet by 70 feet, which is the current existing church that we use today. The same exact building is still in use today. And when they built the church, and they built the parsonage between the church and the alley because it was on our property, and that parsonage was used then by the preacher when the church was in use, except during the Civil War.
So is that the second image here? Is this that church in 1859, or is this the building they built in 1859?
Yeah, 1859 is that building you see there. And at the time, it was one of the finest churches west of the Mississippi. It had beautiful mahogany benches, pews. That beautiful
it's a nice steeple they got there.
Yeah.
They had a bell. There was a bell at that time. There was still a bell in the bell tower, and the way that it was controlled was in the narthex in the back of the church. There was a closet in the center where the actual door is now that we enter the church. from the south, those double doors, that used to be a closet, and that's where they kept the candelabra, stuff. That's where they just. And one of the things was there was a rope that hung down in that closet, and that's how they rung the bell, was from the rope hanging down in that closet. And if you look real carefully on that picture, you see the three windows on the south side, the three stained glass windows on the south side, which are still visible. If you go to the narthex, you'll see the three stained glass windows. What's a little bit more difficult to see there, but also a little strange, is there is a fourth stained glass window in the middle, above the one that's there that you can see better.
Yeah.
But that stained glass window is no longer there. During a storm, that window was blown in, and it landed inside in the bell tower, and they really couldn't replace it at the time or fix it, so they just bricked over it, and you can't even tell from the outside now that there used to be a window there. But if you want to see it, it's in the bell tower. The actual stained glass window is up in the bell tower, because it was too big to take out through the little manhole that they had to access the bell tower.
So how well it is preserved?
It looks like it's 100 years old, but it's in pieces. So, but anyway, it's still up there, but it was broken when it came out. So but that is the actual building that we still use today.
So the steeple changed, am I right? It looks different.
Yeah, that steeple was blown off. There weren't a lot of records kept for a while. At one time, the steeple was there, and the next picture we see it's gone. So as far as we know, it happened by natural happenings, just wind, tornado, I don't know, high winds, something blew it off there, and that's when they changed it and just capped it off and left it without a steeple until very recently, when church members paid for a new one.
We were without a steeple for a long time.
I was wondering why we have those commemorative plates with the, just a flat top. Why wasn't there a steeple? So, yeah, it's interesting to hear.
For a long time.
That's one of those
threads we lose.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Presbyterian Church has a beautiful steeple. The Baptist Church has a beautiful steeple. St. Mary's has a beautiful steeple. But the Methodist Church didn't have a steeple for about 75 years. It was a long time that they went without a steeple.
And of course, steeples are symbolically pointing towards God, right? So that's why we have them, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And I suggested when we fixed that steeple, just like the past couple years ago, we fixed the steeple. We needed to upgrade it, put some LED lights up there or something, call some attention. But no, we got the regular steeple. It works well. Yeah. It's pointing to God.
That's right.
From a personal viewpoint, I've been up in the bell tower, and up on top is very nice just to be able to go up there and walk around and look out all four sides. And they had a brick wall. What do you see there? Became brick, and they bricked it up higher and it had openings in it so you could see out. But anyway, it was nice to be able to go up there and just walk around in the
Absolutely.
bell tower.
Do you know the name of the architect who designed this?
No, I don't. The only thing that is showed in the records was the trustees for the church, the names of the trustees for the church who approved the design, but it didn't say in the records that I found who it was.
So you mentioned that we did not have a steeple for 75 years. Do you have any pictures or images of that design? How did the church look without it?
Is that the next picture Ted has, John?
No.
Outside.
Yeah.
No. I think so.
No.
Here it is.
There it is. You can see it on the plate.
Yes, uh-huh.
Okay,
You
so this
can
is the
see
educational wing.
there's a big picture, and I don't have it here in front of me, but on one of the old directories, there's a big picture of what the church looked like. We probably have some in the library.
Okay.
It just, yeah, church
Yeah.
stops right here.
Well, and this picture shows it very well. It's kind of small there, but you can see up in the right-hand corner is the original church with the original steeple, but then the lower picture shows the basically the current church with the sanctuary area, the first classroom area, and then the north classroom area, which wasn't added until 1976. So up in still at 1976, there was still no spire. There was still no steeple.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I've got the plate. This is that plate that
If I
you have a
remember, they
picture of
sold
there.
those as a fundraiser. My mother had one for years. I think they sold those as a fundraiser.
They did. It was one of the whenever something came up that the church needed money for, in addition to regular offering, they would have some kind of something to sell, and to the church members would buy them, and then the money would go to whatever current project it was. The plates were used to help pay for that North Educational Wing, and there were
John, you're
yearly
cutting out.
plates. So there were yearly plates, and so each year a lot of people would buy the new one. I think my mother had probably at least 10 of these decorative plates. This is the only one I was able to hold on to, but brothers and sisters and so forth have the others. But that does show right there what the steeple looked like. I mean, what the bell tower looked like without a steeple in it. And for Sheryl and I, that's what we grew up with. Having a steeple is kind of a new thing for us.
It is.
This was added in 2006.
Tad, if you go back one to that piece of wood that you had on there, that was another fundraiser.
That was done during the remodeling of the sanctuary. When the members of the church decided that they needed to remodel the sanctuary because they were having problems with the roof and with the ceiling and with the light fixtures that were in the church. That other interior picture, the black and white picture of the interior, kind of shows you what it looked like before the remodel. And
There.
yeah, that's it. And you can see those old wagon wheel lights. The picture is not high enough to show that there were bare wires up at the ceiling where it connected, and they were really concerned about safety and just wanting to remodel it. And at this picture, you see there's you can tell it's the organ was an old type pipe organ, and you can see the pipes, and there's a small cross up there, but all along the back wall are the pipes from the pipe organ. And there were two side aisles instead of one center aisle. And if you look at the sanctuary now and you see the air ducts in the back wall, that's where there used to be a door on the left and a door on the right. And in between it was solid. That's where the janitor's closet was I was talking about previously.
You mentioned the pews. So here probably we see the pews that is, you mentioned mahogany. But we don't have them any longer, right?
Correct. There's been 3 sets of pews. The original pews were mahogany when it was built, and one of the prettiest in the country. Then when Civil War happened, they used those pews for fire. So they burned up all the pews that were in the church. They took up some of the floor, did other things, damages to the church. And so these pews were replaced in about 1866 or 67 when they came back in, when the women took the church back away from the Union Army and went back in to redo it. They had to replace all the pews.
And then when we remodeled, our oak pews are different than these. The ones that we have now.
So now we have those oak.
Right.
Yeah, that right
pews.
there. That's the current sanctuary with the center aisle, and there was a lot of discussion about that, whether you want to have a single aisle down the middle or a separate. And at the time, it was very popular to have an unbroken path for everyone to the altar. Everyone should have access to the altar, and it was by a center aisle that was the main focal point, and everything pointed towards that. If you notice, and it's kind of hard to tell there from this picture, it's kind of small, but if you notice the two walls on each side up where the altar is, they're slanted inward. The two side walls are wider at the bottom than they are at the top. And that was another big discussion in the church when the remodeling happened. The how do I word it? The structural engineers, the architects, the construction guys did not want it to slant because they said it would not be as structurally sound. They should be perpendicular to the floor, 90 degrees, and that's the way it should be. The kind of the dreamers,
The aesthetic.
we're thinking, but we want to point up towards God, point to the heavens. So we should bring them in so that they slant inward. And if you were to ask members in the church today, they wouldn't know that they actually do slant, but they do. And those were the ones who won out and decided that it is safe and it is structurally sound, but it's also aesthetic, that it points to God, points up. So that's why those are angled the way they are. That was another question that someone had asked me about, is why it slants like that.
I remember Karen Anderson came to me after talking to you.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, people had no idea about those walls, that it is, it's not noticeable unless somebody tells you. So she took me to the sanctuary, showed it to me after she talked to you. She said, I didn't know that it's just the case. So yes, thank you for telling us.
So this picture here, this is from 1959 to before the 1959. So this
is up to
what it looked like in 1960.
Right.
This is 1960.
Yeah. During the time when they started tearing everything out, they started in 59, and they tore out everything. Took out all the old pews, took out the ceiling where those lights were hanging. They took out the roof. They took the roof off. Basically, there was nothing there but a floor and the walls with the stained glass windows. Everything else was pretty much removed, and that's where we got those plaques from, the wooden plaques. They cut up the ceiling beams, and some of 4 of the members of the church got together and looked at that big, huge blank wall on the south end of the church and thought that there should be something there. And that's when they decided to hire an artist to sculpt the statue of Jesus and have it mounted on that wall. And what they were hoping for was to have it made from the wood that had been used in the old sanctuary. And they really tried. They took the pulpit out, and some of the pews join the wood together to make huge blocks of wood. But the sculptor said that he just couldn't use that. So he purchased other wood, another block of wood that he could use to make the sculpture. And that's how he managed to do that, and then have it fastened to the wall. It was the church was remodeled starting in 59, finished in 1960, and the statue was added in 64. And
I can't tell you how many ministers I have heard say from the pulpit, when you look up at the back of most churches, you see a clock, because they don't want you preaching too long. But how nice it was to look up in the back of our church and see that statue of Jesus.
I think it's even much stricter, because you won't joke with Jesus, like, oh, I need to finish. It's better. It works, I will tell you. Well, he's like, no.
And during that remodeling, when the church was damaged before, that little old red brick building was torn down, we met with the Baptist and the Christians and the Presbyterians. When the remodeling was being done in 1959 and this remodel was taking place, guess what church we went to? We went to the Granada Theater across the street. That's right. And we met and we had church services in the Granada Theater.
John, was Barbara married in the Granada Theater?
No, she was supposed to be married in 1959 in November, but everything was torn out. And so she got married at the church down on 23rd Street.
So they did weddings, though, in the Granada Theater, because that was what we had.
Yeah, that was it.
Tell me about the Granada Theater. Like, what is that?
If it's diagonally across the street, the gas station is straight across the street to the south, and across the street from that gas station to the east towards town was a Granada movie theater, and right on the very corner was a little snack bar where they sold popcorn and candy and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't part of the theater, just connected to it, but it was one of the major theaters in Independence at the time. The Granada and the Englewood were the two main ones, but that's where I went to see Roy Rogers and Lone Ranger and all those good movies.
So this is a present movie theater, or is it not?
It's not there any longer. The Englewood Theater is still existing, but not used as a theater.
Okay. I just realized, thinking about back to Jesus, that it will be this year 60 years since this figure, the statue, was installed. So it's something else to celebrate. Wow.
Yeah, that's true.
So what do we have next on your slide?
Ted, you want to go back to where we left off? There we go.
I think this was it.
Yeah, that was in 1926. The church still existing as it was, and the actual parsonage is still there behind the church to the north. But the reason I put that on is because that's the year that the City of Independence built the memorial building, just our neighbor to the west. And they built right up next to the alley, and it's the same existing structure that they have there now. That's when it was built, was in 1926, and was originally meant to be a memorial to World War I soldiers, but it's become a memorial to all soldiers.
I guess I'm not old enough. I've lived here all my life and didn't know Truman used to be called Van Horn Road.
Yeah, during this period of time, it was called Van Horn Road. It's gotten several names. It's been Truman for a long time, at least. Yeah, probably longer than that.
So from
I'd say-
Alley, it became Van Horn and then Truman.
Right. There could be others. I think people referred to it a lot of different ways. It was one of the major roads between Independence and Kansas City. And so for a while it became, I think it was even called Lexington Road. But
I think my mother used to call it 13th Street. Is that right, John?
15th Street.
15th Street, huh?
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
whatever.
But it's
Okay.
I couldn't find the exact time that they did the official change of it to Truman, but during the time that the memorial building was built, it was Van Horn Road.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
is
was
the
it
memorial building? Sorry, is it pretty much the same as it is now? The memorial building built in 1926, or
All the changes.
I mean, they've
all the
added on
changes-
top inside, obviously.
Well, all the changes in the memorial building have been internal. The same building is that you see today is the building that was there when it was built. There's been a lot of improvements
What's
and
there now?
remodeling
They
inside.
have the Three Trails museum, all that stuff. That didn't used to be. It used to be
No.
just a really old building with a whole lot of ugly, disgusting rooms and one big, huge
basketball court.
stage area, which we have used as a church for a lot of things.
In 1985, when we celebrated the church's 150th year celebration, we put on a play in the memorial building on that stage, and we had a dinner and a show, a play, and the play was about our church and what happened during the Civil War. I can't remember who I was. I was some old preacher, I think. I don't know. But in fact, I still have the script, and I still have the list of all the names of the people
Oh,
who
geez.
appeared in that play.
What is
I
that
hope,
about?
yeah, oh my, that's very interesting. I hope you were not that preacher who ran away during the Civil War.
Or was
I
hiding
don't
in
remember.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, it was. We talked about that because I can remember whoever played the preacher at that time, Leftwich. It was mainly about him, and we got the basic facts from the play from Leftwich's book, and he talks about how he had to escape from Independence and go to his other church, which was in Lexington, to escape the Union soldiers.
So you
And
mentioned that he had a book.
Yeah, he did. I have it. But also in 1985, when we did the sesquicentennial, we buried a time capsule. Do you know where that is, Lydia?
No.
Well, every preacher from 1985 till now was supposed to give message to the new incoming preacher to tell him where the time capsule is buried,
Nobody told me.
so it can be
Oh.
dug up. So
Okay,
I'm
let's
hoping-
find it.
I'm hoping that I can remember about where it is, and so we could map it out. But
Because I
it's
thought
hidden-
first, yeah. I thought you were
It's
talking
hidden.
about.
Yeah, I believe it's underneath the playground.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about those notes that were placed when the altar pipes were covered in the wall, in the sanctuary. Like behind the screens that we have around the cross, behind them, people put notes like in a prayer wall between the pipes. Am I right?
That's something that I've heard Ross talk about. I haven't really been. I'm not familiar about it with that, but I know Ross has even apparently, according to what he told me, gotten behind the pipes during church services. So
Because he was a little scamp when his dad was the minister here.
Okay, now we need to ask Ross what he did to this church. Well, he might know about the capsule.
He
Ross
was
was gone. I'm not sure if Tim
Karen-
Ming might remember. I'm not
Well,
sure.
Karen Anderson might remember.
But yeah, I believe it's out. There's a sign out there in that yard where the toy.
Okay,
Where
so
the-
Ted, let's find out.
I think it's near
dig
that
up-
sign.
Yeah, interesting.
Ted,
Well,
you have the next slide, Ted?
Yeah.
Okay, John. So,
Okay, well, this is just in 1929, 3 years after the memorial building was built. The church built the educational wing perpendicular to the sanctuary and running east and west there, right to the north of our property line, which was the alley. And we've talked about this a lot. That's where the kitchen, the dining room, all the classrooms on the second floor and on the third floor, and the attic above it. So there's actually 4 levels to the education wing. And it was put in 1929.
I didn't realize it is perpendicular. It looks like it's long, but now I can see on the diagram.
Well, and once we add the north educational wing, it looks a little bit more like a cross.
go to the
Yes.
next one, Ted. You'll see that.
But-
I
That's
think.
for sure, right? Yeah.
But at the
Oh, maybe
time,
not.
there really wasn't any choice, because with the alley there, we couldn't build out any further. And the biggest way they could put it in was to make it run east and west and take it right up to the alley. And the Wesley Center is there in, does that say 1954?
7.
57. I thought it was 57, but that looked like a 4. That's when it was purchased from the Kepley Funeral Company. And that's when we first started using it. It was in 57, and used it up until it was torn down in 1975.
So this is presently a parking lot, right?
The only parking that was available was behind the funeral home or the Wesley Center. Other than that, people just parked on the street. There was room for 3 or 4 cars on the side of the alley, on the south side of the alley. But that was all. And then just parked in the street. So there wasn't much space. The house that right on up there on Van Horn Road, which is now Truman Road, was Bill Vardaman's house, and he was an old-time member, and he donated his house to the church, that when he died, we would take ownership of it. And the other 2 houses that are down there on Pleasant were church members. The one closest to the alley was church members. The one on the corner had been a church member, but they started attending the Baptist church across the street right there. So they were no longer members. And when, let's see, the next side, I think, will show.
There we go.
Yeah, okay. In 1966, the church bought out those 2 houses, all those 2 lots, and I have the amount, but I can't remember. And they bought that out. So then they owned almost all of the block. They were able to use that for additional parking lot. That whole section, those 2 sections together, were made into a parking lot. And the only structure that was still standing was the funeral home and Bill Vardaman's home. And later, a clinic would be built on that corner right next to where the Wesley Center was.
Keep going, Ted.
When the church purchased those 2 in
There.
66, there's the clinic on the corner, and Bill Vardaman's house, as I wrote it in there, Bill Vardaman.
Okay.
He actually deeded it to us in 1984 and said, however long he lasts, he wants to be able to stay there. But when he's gone, we can have it. And that's what happened. He died in 1986. And that's when they took possession of the house and also bought it was a Dr. Whetstone was his name. And he had a clinic there on the corner. The Whetstone family had owned the property for a long time. And eventually he built the clinic there. And
So
it
there's
was-
the latest addition right there, that North
Mhm.
Education Wing. That's
Yeah.
what we
that was built in when we bought the funeral home and used it for classes for a long time, tore down the Wesley Center to build the current North Educational Wing. And it was built in 1976.
Mm-hmm.
And the congregation was getting older, and they really felt the need to have a elevator, but it has a dual purpose. I don't know if you are aware. Someone asked about the elevator, but it's also the appropriate size for a casket. There is such a problem having funerals in the church, getting the casket up and down the steps. So when they added that addition there, they had the elevator put in, but it had to meet specifications so that a casket would fit in that area, and you could roll it right in, have the funeral, roll it right out without having to worry about steps.
Mm-hmm. That's a best decision I think you made back then. So the date then the elevator was built was what year?
1976 was
1976. Okay.
that's when that North Addition, that was the last addition to the church.
So same year when the educational wing was built with the elevator, correct? Together.
Yeah, the elevator and education wing was
Together.
all.
I see. Not the later edition. Okay. That was smart.
And we have a 50-year-old elevator. Is that right? Almost. Still
I
running.
thought-
We get it stuck. a few
Well,
times, but
but
it's
our elevator has had terrific upkeep because we've had Steve Wolf most of that time.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's kept it running.
Yes, yes, it does. That's a good idea.
And so then in 1988, we bought that home from Dr. Whetstone, his clinic from Dr. Whetstone, and actually at the time made it into a agape room, which was a place for people we were our own Salvation Army. People could donate clothes, and we would give them away from the agape room.
This was Anita Wolf and my brainchild, and we did it for a long time. We had folks come in who needed clothes and things, and we stored them in there, and we'd open it up once or twice a week and hope that people would come and get stuff.
So that was Anita's idea? Is it what you say?
She will not say that. She will say it was mine. I will say it was hers.
Okay, so both of you we will assign. But you took it down. What a good idea.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to restore agape room, but inside the church.
I don't think I can talk her into that again.
That's interesting. Because we do collect clothes, right, Ted? And then we can maybe find the space for that and call it agape room. Because agape means love.
It does.
Yeah, very good. Oh, thank you. That is very, very deep and interesting.
Well,
so, do we have more slides?
Well, this next slide is when this was basically after
There.
1988. Once Bill Vardaman died, unfortunately, they tore down his house to make the parking lot bigger, and the agape room was still there on the corner, but not real successful, and it turned out to be a lot of work for not a lot of appreciation from the community. A lot of people came in to take advantage of it, and so eventually then we made a deal with the city, and they signed a long-term contract with the city, with the church, and said that we'll tear down the Whetstone building and we'll put in a parking lot with trees and shrubs and make it look pretty, and we will maintain the parking lot for snow removal and care and maintenance if you just let us use it when we have something going on at the Memorial Building. So that was the contract, the long-term contract that we made with the city. It's always been very agreeable with each other. They always have allowed us to use the Memorial Building whenever we need to, and we've always allowed them to use the parking lot whenever they need to.
Yeah.
But actually, you can see from that picture that the only two buildings left on this block now is our church and the Memorial Building, and everything else is parking lot or grass.
And it's a good partnership because Memorial Building uses our parking lot often, but also the city, we have lots of requests. Just today I looked at the calendar and we have events at the Memorial Building through August, I believe. And of course we have our Santa Caligon event when we celebrate with the city. This wonderful occasion, Santa Caligon, that I've learned about. So that's a good ministry for the church.
It is.
It used to be a lot bigger. In 1976, we started with a Coke trailer, a Coca-Cola trailer, and the men's club sold buffalo burgers.
Oh.
And there was four of us. Jim Chinnaman was one of them, and my brother and I, and Sue's ex-husband, Craig Carmichael. And we basically did the most of the work on it, and it turned out to be very successful. And we've then moved on and built. Steve Wolf was very helpful in building a whole new structure for us, and we used to take in thousands of dollars from Santa Caligon for the men's club. And
was that on the church property that you had that?
No, we at that time, the first trailer we had was 2 blocks east on the street. Just put the trailer there on the street. After that, we were right on the square, right on the southwest corner of the square, and we were there for so many years that when we quit putting our booth up, people came around asking where it was, why they weren't still there. But we were there for 30 years probably.
Maybe we need to restart.
Because we're only a block away. Actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to start something because we're really close. We could do it right on your property, but yeah. And I know the booths cost more and more. We go into
Buffalo burgers weren't real popular. We ended up going with roast beef, and we had roast beef and baked beans and chips,
ham,
drinks, and ham.
Yeah.
At the booth.
And
I guess
the booth
always on Sunday morning.
Go ahead.
Always on Sunday morning during Santa Caligon, we would feed the church. So
yeah,
whatever foods we were preparing in the kitchen, some of it would go up to the booth to be willing to be sold up there, and the rest of it we used in the dining room to feed the church members.
What I was saying is the booth that Steve built after we stopped using Coke trailers, he made to look maybe not exactly like our church, but really similar to it. It was really a cool thing.
The windows that you go up to order from were pointed at the top,
like our
so it
stained
was
glass
in the
windows.
shape of our stained glass windows.
And who did you say built it?
Steve Wolf.
Steve Wolf.
Steve did that. Okay, now we need to say Steve built another one.
Ooh, Steve, I'm sorry. If you're watching this, I'm so sorry I said that.
But he's a very talented artist, so I understand. But all we need, I think, 2 things is men's club bag, a trailer, and actually 3 things. And ask Steve to make that top again, looking like a church. That is fascinating. Don't you think, Ted, that that's a future?
Could be.
We could do a lot more with Santa Caligon if we want, for sure.
I think so.
You're
Wow.
probably right about that.
Yeah.
Another little tidbit that you might be interested in our history. There used to be a black church, Methodist church in Independence by the name of White Oak Methodist Church. and they ended up with like 5 or 6 members, and they couldn't handle the church anymore. So those members all came to our church and joined our church and deeded the building to us in 1982 is when that happened, and the church took over ownership of the White Oak Methodist Church building, and the members all came here.
And who are the
Where was
names?
that
What do you
church?
have? Yeah.
The names of the members?
Who came from that church?
Oh my gosh, that was so long ago. My head.
But maybe next time you can share about that too.
We can look that up. But we ended up, I think, with like maybe 4 was all that was left.
I would say John says all the members come here. That all is very deceiving. There were like 4 or 6.
Yes, of course,
Yeah,
right.
there wasn't much left. They really hated to shut down the church,
Yeah.
and they wanted to keep it open, and they were hoping that some of our members would come up there and meet with them and keep it going, but it just wasn't to be done. And the only other thing they could do was to come join us and give us the ownership to the building. So
Dad, is that the last slide?
Yes, it is.
No.
And
Okay.
Yeah.
well, there's one
that's the
more.
only one I have. Which one are we looking at? What are you looking for? I got up through number 15. So
Oh, okay.
Well, there should be one more.
Well, apparently there is not.
Then maybe for the next
Well,
time.
it's not really important. What it was, I flew over last night and took a picture of the block, the actual block. And so it shows the actual church building and the memorial building from the Google.
You know what,
Google
Tad? I
view.
didn't send it to you.
gotcha. Yeah.
Sorry. My
So that'll
fault.
be interesting to compare how it looks
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Well, I just thought it would look a little bit nicer too, but just see what it looks like today. So
Okay.
that was the only other one.
Thank you. That is absolutely very interesting and educational podcast today. And I think we thank you, John and Sheryl, for first of all preserving all this information, but also saying you don't even look at any notes. You just on the top of your head. That's how knowledgeable you are in history and the old church. And of course, we will now apologize to those who said that it was just for women and men. Now we'll say, well, it is like John said, it is really hard to say for sure. So, okay, more credits go toward all people who participated. Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Sheryl. Ted, could you send us out today?
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, John and Sheryl. Yeah, it was awesome. Great learning about our church, our history, this really old community of Christ's believers, followers. And it's great to hear those stories and encouragement to, get us energized and keep us going and growing. So thanks for sharing. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Yes, and we hope to see you again. I know that you're just a source of very rich material, so maybe one day you can come back to our Tangled time, right, Ted?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Love to have you.
Yes, thank you. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.